Next question is about the somehow the responsibility under the shoulder of states involving the war. In the case of the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran, what is the practical relationship between state responsibility, individual criminal responsibility, aid or assistance in internationally wrongful acts, domestic jurisdiction, evidence preservation, and also the victim's right to justice and reparation? How should we see the connection here?
So as you say, there are a number of different levels of legal responsibility under international law. States are directly responsible for any of their own violations of humanitarian law or the prohibition on the use of force. That they can also be responsible for assisting other states to violate international law. So, for example, by providing weapons or ammunition or intelligence, allowing their bases to be used to move military forces as part of the conflict. So states bear responsibility at that international level. In addition, certain acts are also individual crimes under international criminal law. So that's the case with launching an aggressive war. The political and military leaders are personally responsible, criminally liable for that conduct. The same is true of war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. Both the state can be responsible and has to cease those violations, make reparation, including paying compensation, but also the individual state officials, military and political, who are involved in those crimes could also be held personally, criminally responsible and be sentenced to imprisonment, for example. I mean, the difficulty is enforcing international law because the International Criminal Court, for example, only has jurisdiction for the most part where countries have agreed to give it jurisdiction. And powerful countries like the US and Israel, Iran too, have not accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and that includes for any crimes, aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, or genocide. There can still be a possibility of prosecuting crimes in domestic courts under the principle of universal jurisdiction. And from time to time, courts in Europe and elsewhere have prosecuted some foreign nationals for international crimes related to conflicts abroad. But that also, raises its own problems. I mean, it depends on being able to obtain custody of the offender. So the offender essentially needs to travel to your country in order to be arrested. And then even then, as I mentioned, there are still immunities from foreign domestic criminal courts of serving senior state officials like presidents, prime ministers, etc. So not all state officials can be prosecuted at the domestic level. There are, of course, other mechanisms. The Security Council, General Assembly, Human Rights Council have established evidence gathering and documentation and reporting mechanisms, at least to preserve evidence of what's happened in certain serious conflicts or other kinds of atrocity situations. So that, if the day ever comes in future that it is possible for an international court or a national court to prosecute these crimes, the evidence has been preserved and is available in the future.
Certainly, and for the practicality of international law, it is a requirement that all states uphold international law, as you mentioned. My next question is about the framework and mechanism under United Nations. If the Security Council remains politically blocked in relation to any war, in this case, the US-Israeli war against Iran, what concrete tools within the United Nations human rights system could still be mobilized? How can, for example, special rapporteurs, independent experts, urgent debates, commission of inquiry, fact-finding missions, and dedicated reporting mandates, and also the evidence preservation mechanism kind of help to establish an authoritative factual record, um, kind of to identify the patterns of violations, to protect victims' rights, and finally to prepare the ground for future accountability and reparation. What mechanism do you think exists under United Nations human rights security?
Yes, so many of those mechanisms you mentioned through the UN Human Rights Council based in Geneva can absolutely be helpful in documenting violations, raising public and political awareness about violations. You know, most of these mechanisms work in one or two ways, through either constructively working with governments to try to persuade them or convince them to change their behavior. So through diplomacy and argument and presenting the facts, and hoping that sometimes there are internal champions of change who want their countries to do better, who want to improve their human rights records. But if that fails, you know, these mechanisms can also shine a spotlight to try to shame countries into improving their performance by, you know, raising the political cost, the political heat, by trying to persuade other countries to take concrete measures to try to shape other countries' behavior in the right direction. So, through persuading other countries to condemn or denounce those countries who violate international law, to vote against them in the UN General Assembly or Security Council or Human Rights Council, or even to apply sanctions, as some countries have done on countries that break the law. You know, diplomatic sanctions, travel sanctions, in some cases, financial sanctions, weapons sanctions. You know, all of these are tools that we have to try to pressure law-breaking countries to respect the law again. Now, it's a slow process. It doesn't change behavior overnight, but you know, it's all we've got short of war as a means of settling disputes. And you know, war is no answer. War usually kills lots of innocent civilians, doesn't necessarily resolve the underlying sources of disputes or grievances. So supporting these mechanisms, investing in these human rights mechanisms, is one way, among others, of trying to change law-breaking behavior.
Certainly, thank you so much for your remarks. And in recent years have demonstrated that even in politically polarized situations, UN Human Rights Council, UN Human Rights Mechanism can play an important role in preserving evidence, somehow shaping international narratives, and sustaining long-term accountability efforts. So that's a very big accomplishment, I would say. And last but not least, finally, what does the US-Israeli war against Iran reveal about the future of international law, uh, the future of human security, and the rights of people in the global south? Are we witnessing the emergence of an international order increasingly governed by coercion, hierarchy, and selective legality? Or is there still a very meaningful path toward rebuilding a law based order grounded in sovereign equality, restraint in the use of force, accountability, and also human dignity? How do you foresee the future?
So certainly the US has been very actively undermining international law and multilateral institutions, including, I mean, apart from invading other countries, seeking to exploit their resources, as in Venezuela or threatening invasions of other countries like Cuba. The US has also been attacking international institutions, defunding the UN, attacking UNRWA, attacking the International Criminal Court, attacking the Human Rights Council and special procedures mechanisms. So that is, of course, bad news. The good news, I think, is that the US does not have many supporters in its attacks on international law and international institutions. So, yes, support from Israel, which is another serial lawbreaker. But by and large, most countries, didn't join in the war on Iran. Most countries are still supporting the United Nations, not attacking international institutions. Countries are being too quiet because they're afraid of the US and they want to preserve their economic position and not be subject to retaliation. So lots of countries aren't speaking out against the US, but that doesn't mean that they support the US or its direction of travel on international law and international institutions. So I'm confident and optimistic that international law and the UN will outlast a few years of the Trump administration or other challenges to international order like Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. But it is taking a damaging toll. I mean, it is undermining protection of human rights. It's undermining humanitarian relief to civilians. It's undermining the work of good United Nations entities like UNRWA or other humanitarian action, which has been drastically defunded by the United States and others. So it is important that all responsible states who care about international law stand up for the system, keep funding it, and fill the funding gap that's opened up because of the US's withdrawal from lots of parts of the system, and to continue to call out violations and raise the price on countries like Israel or the US or Russia who systematically violate international law.
You're right, Professor. We need a lot of more actions by non so-called powerful states to make changes because, as you mentioned, for many states and society, especially in the global south, the contemporary conflicts increasingly raise broader concerns regarding the unequal power structures and the asymmetrical enforcement of international law and international norms. So I would say, I would add that if civilian population, if non-governmental institution can raise up, can stand up and demand for changes, it would help to bring transformation in the manners that powerful states play in the international arena. Thank you so much, Professor Ben Saul, for joining us.
Look, thanks very much. It was good to talk with you, Marty, and I'd be happy to stay in touch about possible collaboration.